Hey soccer fans, this is Nick reminding you to check out Sports Spider. If you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as updated as possible on the Chicago Fire or any other team, hit the link in the description to check out SportsSpider.com. Hey soccer fans, welcome back to the Feed the Fire podcast. I am your host Nick, and if it's not obvious enough, I am back from my vacation, back to the motherland, to Greece, and back for another episode of the Feed the Fire podcast, where we're talking all things Chicago Fire and Major League Soccer. In this episode, we are recapping the Fire's latest match, a 2-2 draw away at NYCFC, a come-from-behind draw that for a moment almost felt like they won the game. We'll also look at the table and see where this result leaves Chicago in terms of playoff standings. We're going to take a look at the transfer tracker as well, since the summer transfer window has closed, see what kind of big moves some of the teams around the league have made, and we'll check in on a couple other headlines from around the league. Before we get started with that, just a couple housekeeping measures. If you'd like to reach out to me, continue the conversation offline here, you can always email me, glasshousesoccer@gmail.com, or you can find me on social media at glasshousesoccer. Another quick update. Make sure you go and look at the CHGO Fire podcast. They've got details on their website for their annual big tailgate, and they're doing it this weekend at the Miami match. They've got a ticket deal where you can get a ticket in the 400 level, some drinks at their tailgate, as well as a CHGO Fire t-shirt. So make sure you check that deal out. Support CHGO Fire. Support Alex Campbell, who's been a friend of this show, who I've made some appearances over there. Make sure you continue to follow along with some other great Chicago Fire coverage. And finally, Coach Nick is back. I have once again agreed to take up the mantle as my son's head coach this year, coaching his third grade team. So stay tuned for more adventures in youth soccer and what kind of developments and fun things are in store with that. Now let's get right into the Chicago Fire recap. In our last episode, I predicted that there'd be goals in this game. I predicted a 2-2 draw, and we got a 2-2 draw. Not to pat myself on the back, because I didn't think this game would unfold anything like it did. I thought it would be a lot more of a back-and-forth game with teams making runs and having spells of possession, or at some instances like a track meet on a smaller field, the Fire looking to counter with Cuypers, but no, this was a very, very bad Chicago Fire team for about 70 minutes or so, and then something finally kicked in the midway through that second half. Maybe it was some of the subs, maybe it was the Fire realizing NYC was kind of settling back and taking their foot off the gas that gave them a little more confidence to push higher and push forward. But whatever it was, the Chicago Fire came from behind 2-0 to draw 2-2 with a Brian Gutierrez stoppage time PK goal as the icing on the cake. Now, post-game, Frank Klopas, the manager, said, "I think the one thing for me is that this team has not given up. I think that some games have gotten out of control a little bit, where you're pushing the game, and down into a lead, you have to take risks. But we got rewarded with that risk, and the guys, it was a huge belief, and they fought extremely hard and big confidence in the room." So I think that's great, and I think he is recognizing that there are players on this team, or that there are moments during games where the players aren't going to give up. But it would be so much better if they had that belief and confidence in themselves when they take the field before the opening whistle, and a lot of that falls on the coaching staff to get them prepared, and a lot of that falls on the so-called leadership council, and we'll mention that in a little bit. Also, the players need to put some onus on themselves and keep themselves accountable. Now, as far as the goals in this match, Alonso Martino had a great first half for New York City. 2 goals in the 15th minute and the 22nd minute. And just kind of as an aside, when I was setting my MLS fantasy lineup, which I'm a terrible MLS fantasy manager. I'd probably be a lot better real manager than fantasy manager. I know I'm a better U9 manager than I am an MLS fantasy manager. But my son is looking at it and he says, "You got to start Martinez. Start Martinez against the Fire." And I'm like, "Son, we never start anyone against the Chicago Fire. Just as a matter of principle, I don't want to be rooting against the Chicago Fire in any way, shape, or form. And it's cost me a lot of points in fantasy, and it definitely cost me points today. Again, Martinez with 2 goals in the 15th minute and the 22nd minute. That first goal to me was a product of a few things, tangible and intangible. Intangible, the Fire weren't prepared to play. They looked disinterested. They allowed NYC to easily possess the ball, did not pressure them, and the first 15 minutes was really building towards this goal. Additionally, the Fire played in their defensive posture with a 5-man back line, or if you want to call it a 3 center back system and have the wing backs, whatever. But they had a 5-man back line in their defensive shape, and when you're playing a small field like Citi Field, and I thought they were playing at Yankee Stadium. They're at Citi Field, not the Yankees, Met Stadium. But still, the point remains, it's a baseball field. It's a smaller pitch, and it's much more narrow. And so if you're having 5 guys along your back line, they're playing extremely close to each other. And you're really not allowing your defenders to pressure some of those midfielders to step up, close down some of the passing lanes. And when you have 5 men across the back line on a narrow field, you're essentially having 2 guys cover the same space. Now, if New York City is trying to overload a side, or if there are 2 guys making overlapping runs, then yeah, bring your guys out and track the runners. But if you're starting with a 5-man back line in your defensive shape, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage against an NYCFC team that loves possession, especially around the box, and now you're lining up inside the box, and you're putting yourself at a disadvantage on a small pitch. So I think that was the intangible. They weren't prepared to play mentally. The tangible, they weren't prepared to play tactically. And then you just saw Kellyn Acosta get completely turned around by Martinez. Acosta looks slow and out of it the entire game. Now, is it the League's Cup break, or is it just Acosta? Who knows at this point? A lot of people are starting to really get down on Acosta, despite him being this acclaimed signing, the best free agent in MLS, internally in MLS this offseason. So I didn't say that, other people did. I'm not talking about just Chicago Fire people. I'm saying people who analyze the league called Kellyn Acosta the best available free agent intra-league signing, and he has not looked the part for long stretches of this season. But he absolutely gets spun around by Alonso Martinez, who's able to shoot one far post, well-placed shot. Maybe Brady could get a little of his footwork better. I don't know. Maybe he was too close to the near post. You're not going to nitpick the goalie on this one. If you're going to let guys shoot from 18 yards out, there's not much you can say about Chris Brady, right? The second goal was just another comical performance by the Fire defense. It had me remembering the ridiculousness of the Facundo Torres goal, where it was just pinballing around. In this particular instance, they get caught napping on a New York counterattack. Martinez makes an unmarked run into the middle of the box. New York's winger pulls a pass back across to him. 3 Chicago Fire defenders trying to recover all go sliding as Martinez takes just an extra little touch to the right, and they all go sliding right by him. Brady goes low, Martinez shoots high, and it's 2-0 in the 22nd minute. Terrible first half by the Fire. Again, nobody looked prepared, nobody looked interested. I had no idea how they were going to crawl out of this hole. But oddly enough, the Chicago Fire social media admin tweets out at halftime, plenty of game left to play. And I made the joke like, wow, optimism, thy name is Chicago Fire social media here. Like, you're really saying after watching that first half, don't worry, there's plenty of game time left. Well, apparently there was just enough time for the Chicago Fire to salvage a draw, because they start to pick up momentum midway through that second half. And maybe it was the substitutes. Let's see if I can find the actual feed here and see what minutes those subs actually came in. You saw Mueller come in at halftime for Aragoni. You saw Salquist come in at halftime for Turan, which was an injury substitution. Turan is injured again. We'll see how serious it is. I haven't heard anything since the game ended. Then the next group of subs come in the 72nd minute. So maybe the subs did have something to do with it. You see Fede Navarro come in for Acosta, Koutsias comes in for Haile Selassie, and Reynolds comes in for Gutman. So all like-for-like subs there. And then the goal comes in the 78th minute. You see Tobias Sahlqvist stepping high, getting some pressure in the midfield, gets the turnover, and then on his second touch, plays the ball directly to Cuypers' feet through a couple of New York City defenders, and then Cuypers does the rest. He does what we paid him $12 million to do. Jukes the defender, cuts back on his left foot, and just puts a beautiful curling shot around NYC goalkeeper Matt Freese. Nothing he could do to stop that. And it's just an amazing goal. First of all, it tells me that Hugo Cuypers is not going to be one of those guys, those pro soccer players I criticize for not knowing how to use both of his feet, because he can score left, right, head, any body part I think he can find the back of the net with. But it just shows you that Cuypers is not giving up. He is the embodiment of what Frank Klopas said, that these guys don't give up, they have confidence, they believe. And Cuypers is one of the few guys who has done it consistently throughout the season. He never has the negative body language. He's always the one that's fighting. So it's great to see him get rewarded. His 10th goal on the season, double-digit goals for the DP striker. And then the equalizer comes in stoppage time. I had no idea what NYC player Tavon Gray was doing, trying to defend Rafael Chihos, who was trying to make a cross into the center of the box. He looked like a youth player, like covering his face and throwing his arms up, just flailing about. Like his arm was way out, away from his body. This handball call is the easiest one any referee would ever have to make. It didn't even go for a VAR check. They didn't even try to say, well, maybe the ball played the hand, or maybe he was too close, and was it in an... Nope, it was immediately handball, penalty kick, no VAR check, right to the spot. And it was Brian Gutierrez who picks the ball up and takes it to the spot. Confident strike, upper right-hand corner as you face the goal. No chance for the keeper. No chance for just about any keeper to save it. And I was a little curious as to who was going to be the PK guy, who was going to step up. So to see Gutierrez do it, first of all, I got so nervous for him because I'm thinking if he misses this or if it gets saved, this is going to kill his confidence and the rest of the team's confidence, at least for the rest of the season, if not into the beginning of next season. But he absolutely drills it. It's the confidence we need to see in Brian Gutierrez as he continues to develop his game. Now, to be fair, he was criticized on the broadcast for needing to improve some of his defensive skill set. But at this point in his career and where the Fire are as a team, I'm just glad he picked the ball up and put it in the back of the net without hesitation. So of Guti's performance there, Klopas said the following postgame. Guti had huge confidence to pick up the ball there on the spot in a difficult moment and get the tying goal. I wasn't able to look. And yeah, I had that moment. I almost didn't watch the entire second half because I was so upset with the first half. But my butterflies for Guti and for the club and for everyone watching during that penalty kick, I almost didn't watch it either. So I'll sympathize with Klopas on that one. He went on to say, I think Guti can improve and be a bigger factor over 90 minutes for sure, but it was great to see him get the goal and the way he came more into the game in the second half. So even Frank Klopas is saying we like the confidence, we need to see more from him throughout the course of the game. Part of that is definitely a young player growing into a professional role, starting week in, week out, and being an influencer on the pitch. Part of it, he's going to need some better coaching, without a doubt, and hopefully that'll come in this offseason. One thing I mentioned before, the Leadership Council, it really kind of came into my mind with this penalty kick. Is Cuypers going to take it? Is Gutierrez going to take it? Is someone else going to say, no, I want the ball? Like, would Chris Mueller pop up and be like, I'm taking it? Or Chihos come, or someone say Chihos should take it? He's taken a couple maybe in the past. I'm glad Gutierrez got it, and I think he should be heavily considered for the captaincy next season. It was reported prior to this game that the Fire were using a leadership council. People asked, with Shaqiri gone, who's going to wear the captain armband? And it's going to rotate between Jimenez, Herbers, and Acosta. Which, okay, fine. The way they're playing right now, the way they're in the standings, the way the team has had to deal with all these locker room issues and turmoil and just, inconsistency. That's the word, not non-consistency, inconsistency. Okay, fine, go to a leadership council. I don't like it, and I don't think it's something that a healthy locker room team, a healthy team will have. You will need to have that singular voice holding people accountable and making decisions on the pitch, especially when you've got some fiery players out there like a Fede Navarro, like a Carlos Turan, who a captain will need to say, hey, cool it, especially with next year's rule coming into place that only captains can talk to the officials. I'm assuming MLS is going to implement that as other leagues have implemented it at the beginning of this season, starting this fall, like we see in the Premiership. So they're going to need an individual player to start holding people accountable. I'd like it to be Gutierrez because I think as he matures into that captaincy role, if they give it to him, then that will help him in other areas of the game. He'll have to play better on both sides of the ball and have to be more of a leader and take responsibility in game situations. So that's what I would like to see. We talked a little bit about the subs. The Chicago Fire started with a 3-5-2 lineup, but again, you saw the wing players, Aragoni and Gutman, dropping into a 5-man back line in their defensive posture. And then you saw those like-for-like subs with Mueller and Reynolds coming in on the wing and Koutsias coming in for Haile Selassie. What was interesting to note was the announcers were really saying that Koutsias coming in as that second striker really opened some space up for Cuypers or allowed him to make different runs. Did Haile Selassie not do that? Or maybe the Fire just weren't getting the ball forward enough for them to take notice of that. That's something to watch for, Haile Selassie's development, if he continues to stay in the second striker role, or if with Ariel Lassiter coming in and Koutsias starting to develop, will they put Selassie back on the wing and then rely on Cuypers, Koutsias, possibly Lassiter, possibly another striker signing next season. Additionally, just wanted to note, yes, Turan went out with another injury, and honestly, when he went down, my first thought was, oh, I guess he's going to be a Fire player for as long as he wants to be. Like, he's been wanting this big move to Europe, but he can't stay healthy. He's got a bit of a temper, and because of his injury time, he hasn't really been able to grow and develop as a 90-minute starter or as a confident player who can fit into what the Fire are trying to do, assuming they actually are trying to do anything, right? Like, we can't figure that out yet with Turan being on and off the pitch with his injuries. So I don't think he's going to get that sale to the big European club that he wants. I don't think he's going to get that move this winter, this transfer window. If he has a great start to 2025, yeah, maybe in the summer he gets it, or maybe it's a deal with a loan back and then a permanent move in the winter of 2025-6. But if he continues to pick up these injuries and knocks and miss time, no one's going to want to invest in him. The Fire are either going to have to take a discount to move him or try to negotiate a better contract and keep him on the team for another couple, 3 seasons. So that's something to keep a lookout for with Carlos Turan. And then finally, Ariel Lassiter. Actually, before we get to Lassiter, speaking of roster construction, just when you think you're maybe a DP winger and a midfielder away from a complete roster, I'm just like, get rid of Fede Navarro. We need to rebuild that entire midfield now too, because Navarro, can't go 10 minutes without picking up a card. He's a walking yellow card, and he just pisses off the other team, and I think he pisses off his teammates with his boneheaded play at times. So you got to dump him. You got to get rid of Jimenez, the only defensive midfielder you have, unless you're bringing up some CF2 players, which you are going to have a difficult time evaluating this season due to your current roster construction. You got Acosta. So you're going to have to replace a couple of midfielders, a couple of defenders on top of getting those attacking winger-type players to really make yourself a playoff team. So a lot more work than we initially thought at the beginning of the summer transfer window. But finally, to Ariel Lassiter, he did not make his debut for the Chicago Fire after being a late transfer window acquisition, and that's because he was suspended due to yellow card accumulation, as many people pointed out, despite him being one of the keys to the match from the Chicago Fire. But he will hopefully see the pitch this upcoming Saturday against Inter Miami, and stay tuned here for the Feed the Fire podcast. Our next episode will preview that match. Also, if you're looking for additional Inter Miami coverage, you can pretty much go to any soccer outlet since they're covering everything Miami now. But especially, I want to plug the Battered Herons podcast, part of a independent MLS content creator group that I've been a part of. I've appeared on their show prior to the Fire's match against Miami, where we had a great time talking soccer as well as Chicago-style hot dogs and the lack of ketchup on them. So it's a good group of guys down there putting out some good soccer content on Miami. So make sure you go check them out. And sidebar, when I first heard they're the Battered Herons podcast, I'm like, what is that? Some sort of like chicken tender battered heron? Bad pun. Sorry. At this point in the show, we are going to take our water break as well and recognize our sponsor, Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Icelandic for clear, Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water. Clearly, pun intended, it's one of the best, and Skira Icelandic Spring Water is available at your local 7-Eleven. So continuing on with our show, no clip from John Donovan this week. John, I hope you're doing well. Shoot me a text message. Let me know how things are going. If you've been traveling a little bit more again, would love to chat and catch up about life and the Fire. But as we press on with our show here, let's remind everyone of the stats of that NYCFC game real quick to see if it matched up with your eye test. Unfortunately, MLSsoccer.com had a bit of a glitch, and it's not showing the possession number here, though I would anticipate it to be something like 60-40 in favor of New York. Fire ended up with 9 shots, 3 shots on goal, and blocked 4 shots. Only 388 total passes with an 81.4% passing accuracy. 4 corners, 5 total crosses. They lost the aerial duel battle 17-15. They did end up with 1.8 expected goals, so that's a bit of an improvement, but when you have no offense, anything would be an improvement. Chris Brady was credited with 2 saves, defense credited with 6 clearances, 14 fouls, and 2 yellow cards there. So that's the stats recap for Chicago's performance against NYCFC. Now, looking at a few other headlines from around Major League Soccer. Oh, wait, no, let me get into the table. That's what I wanted to talk about. Where does this result put the Chicago Fire in the grand scheme of things? The Fire are sitting on 26 points after 26 games played. Easy enough math, even for me. They're averaging a point per game. 6 wins, 12 losses, and 8 draws. They have the exact same record as Nashville and DC, who are below them due to goal differential. Now remember, in MLS, the first tiebreaker is number of wins, and then the next tiebreaker is goal differential. The next tiebreaker after that, I would have to go look up. But right now, the Chicago Fire, thank you Chris Brady, only have a minus 12 goal differential, where Nashville's at minus 15, DC's at minus 16. The 2 teams ahead of the Fire in the standings, New England and Montreal, have a negative 19 and a negative 20 goal differential. So if the Fire can somehow just start matching the win totals and keep their goal differential a little bit better than these teams around them, that could give them that little bit of an edge and possible tiebreaker to sneak into that 9th spot. Because if you look at the 2 teams ahead of them, Philadelphia and Montreal, each on 27 points. However, they have played... Montreal has also played 26 games. Philly has only played 25 games. And by the way, New England, who is ahead of the Fire also on 26 points, but they have more wins, they only have 24 games played. So New England and Philly, hopefully they end up losing those games in hand they have, if we're talking the Fire's playoff chances here. Atlanta United is in the 9th spot, that second playing game, on 28 points. They have a negative 3 goal differential, so I don't think we're going to be looking at tiebreakers from them. The Fire are going to have to overtake them on points. They have 7 wins to the Fire's 6. Toronto is in the first play-in spot, the 8th spot, on 33 points. So it's pretty hard for the Fire to catch TFC, though they do have a matchup with TFC late in the season. They already won their first matchup away in Toronto, so for them to take this game in Chicago end of the season, it's going to be a huge match, and it might be one of those games where it's like the Fire got to win this one to get into the playoffs or to even have a chance. However, the last 2 seasons when the Fire have had those kind of games, they have fallen flat on their face. So we can't hold out hope for that based on history. The Fire are just going to need to start putting some wins together this weekend against the first team to clinch the playoff spot in the league, Inter Miami. Now, will Messi be there? Won't he? Most likely he won't be, but you know, I was chatting with some people on the Chicago Fire subreddit saying that, well, the Chicago Fire, we're advertising it as the Messi game. Messi gets hurt. They're advertising it as, you know, a hot night in Chicago with Jason Derulo. They take Messi's name off of everything. And now they're starting to put his name back into the advertising. And some people are saying, hey, Messi might be available for that Chicago game. Like, you might see him on the bench, get a few token minutes, trot out at the end. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm being way optimistic here. I don't think Miami's going to risk him against the Chicago Fire, especially if you got Fede Navarro roaming that midfield like he's just trying to put a boot into Messi at some point. So I don't think we see him, but I do plan on being at the game. More on that Miami game in our next episode when we preview that. So anyway, getting back to the table, the Fire are currently in 13th place on 26 points. They need to make up 2 points. Again, right now Atlanta's in that 9th spot. They'll need to make up 2 points to try and get that, leapfrogging New England, Montreal, Philly, Atlanta, and holding off Nashville and DC. That's the path for the Chicago Fire to make the playoffs. Couple quick headlines. It is the 25th anniversary of Don Garber being appointed the commissioner for MLS. So happy anniversary to the soccer Don, to the commissioner. A lot of people have had some mixed reactions to that and hating on Don Garber for all of his ways he's killing soccer in America. But a lot of other people are also saying if it weren't for Don Garber, the league would have folded. So you can go out and find takes on both sides, looking at the history of the league over the last 25 years with Garber at the helm. You can see the huge financial improvements that he's made, but I think a lot of those early moves were because of strong owners like Hunt and Kraft, and I know I'm forgetting a couple others, but it's those strong owners that I think that really helped shore up the league early on, prevent them from folding. You saw the contraction with Miami and Tampa Bay that kind of helped keep the league afloat. You saw a little bit of an expansion and then take back with Chivas, and then finally things really got rolling, and now you're seeing all the innovative new deals and Leagues Cup and expanded rosters and all that sort of thing. So whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny that the league has grown because of, in spite of, regardless of Don Garber's involvement. Also, along the soccer lines, the Columbus Crew beat LAFC last night 3-1 to win Leagues Cup. A Leagues Cup that had only MLS teams in the semifinals, and people are saying, yeah, and I'm sure in Concacaf Champions Cup, you're only going to see Liga MX teams, maybe one MLS team, just because they'll be in form and in season, whereas we're in form and in season right now. Okay, valid argument. I mean, we used to make that argument all the time to defend MLS as to why they could never win the Concacaf Champions League. Because, it's a preseason for us, and we're still integrating new players, and we've got guys who aren't fit, or guys who are still overseas, or things like that. So I think it's a valid argument, but it does not deny the fact that Columbus Crew defeat LAFC, they pick up another trophy, they clinch a CONCACAF Champions Cup knockout round berth. LAFC also going to CONCACAF Champions Cup. Colorado beats Philly in the third place game, and they secure a spot in CONCACAF Champions Cup as a result. And Fire fans continue to scratch their heads going, Colorado's terrible. They take Miguel Navarro from us, immediately send him to South America. Then they re-sign our former player, Jordi Mihailovic, and hire one of our former players as a coach, who's a potential coaching candidate for us, instead of rehiring Frank Klopas. That would be Chris Armas. And now all of a sudden, Colorado, let's go back to the conference standings there and see where they're at in the table. Colorado is now fourth in the Western Conference on 41 points and secured a CONCACAF Champions Cup spot. So, yeah, Fire fans, scratching your heads there. All right, let's take a quick look at the transfer tracker, pick out a couple headlines, some big names that have moved around, or some names that may have stayed around. Such as the one staying around, Duncan McGuire of Orlando City and, Blackburn speculation. He signs an extension through 2027 with an option for 2028 with Orlando City. Are they going to continue to try and transfer him overseas? I think that's only natural, and I think the club showed a lot of good faith in giving him an extension, allowing teams a little bit more reason to sign him because there's a little bit more control, as well as a good piece of business, not allowing him to walk as a free agent. Also, Real Salt Lake extends the contract of Emeka Eneli through 2028 with an option for 2029. He's only in his second season, and he's coming out of the MLS Super Draft, which, sidebar, we all saw the news about the NWSL's new collective bargaining agreement where everyone's a free agent essentially, and they got rid of the draft, and people are saying, good, MLS should get rid of the draft too. Well, look at Emeka Eneli, this guy who has been an outstanding player since joining RSL from the Super Draft, coming out of Cornell, a guy who knows where his soccer journey would have taken him, but it would not have taken him to a new 3-year contract extension, that's for sure. So great to see him getting rewarded with that. On the outgoing side of things, Philadelphia Union transfer Jose Martinez to Brazilian top flight side Corinthians. Now, Jose Martinez, as an opposing fan, I'm not going to miss him at all. I don't want to call him a dirty player, but he was always right there on the line, and he, at the very least, if he wasn't like making just hard physical tackles, he was doing every little thing to manipulate the ref and get under the skin of his opponents. So I am not going to miss him from that perspective, but he was definitely an entertaining player to watch and a very, very important part and a solid player for what the Philadelphia Union have been doing the last few years. But he's 30 years old, and he is getting transferred, or I should say Philadelphia Union is getting up to $2 million for his transfer. All right, what are some other names that we're seeing? Minnesota United have signed midfielder, I'm going to pronounce it Luke. It's probably Loic Misanvi, and he comes over from their MLS Next Pro affiliate, so they're promoting a player there. He's a midfielder. He should kind of be a good depth piece for the rest of the season, and potentially, depending on his play and how they evaluate him, potentially maybe fill in for a starting roster spot and give them a little flexibility next season as well. Let's see where some of the other names here that we're looking for. Orlando City. Talk about playoff pushes here. They're making some more moves, signing Heine Giklin Bruseth from Norwegian top flight side Kristiansand BK. Oh, that's one of the easier clubs to pronounce. Kristiansand BK. He's 20 years old, Norwegian Youth International, and will take a U22 initiative spot. Signed through 2026 with 2 options after that. So he's repped Norway on the U21 level with a couple of goals for them. So going back to these Scandinavian countries, looking for some young talent. Not a bad recruiting ground for MLS clubs. If you hadn't heard the big news, Colorado has transferred Moise Bombito, the Canadian international, for a record fee for a center back in MLS, but also a club record fee for Colorado. $7.7 million transfer, could reach 10.7 with add-ons. He'll be headed to League One side in France, OGC Nice. So that's a Nice transfer for the Colorado Rapids. Salt Lake has waived Brian Oviedo. All right, let's go rapid fire mode here, okay? Toronto FC loaned Cassius Mailula to Wydad AC. Don't even know where that club is. Dynamo signed Honduran forward Exen Arzu, trying to get some offense there. RSL transfer Andres Gomez to Stade Rennais. Probably mispronouncing that, but he is going over to France's League One side for an $11 million fee that could reach $13 million. This one took a lot of people by surprise because RSL looked to be competing for trophies, And whether they are saying we're still not going to beat LAFC or the Galaxy or Columbus or Miami for trophies this year, and so might as well move him while we can, or they're saying this is just a deal that's too good to pass up. We're going to get $11 up to $13 million for one of our strikers that we have only had for a year and a half, essentially. Like, this is a great piece of business, and they can reinvest that and build out their roster further as they continue to have faith in their coaching staff and new ownership group. So, great piece of business for RSL there. All right, back to lightning round here. Minnesota United signed designated player midfielder Joaquin Pereira. It looks like he's coming over from a club in Argentina, if I can read the logos right. Yes, Atletico Tucumán for $3.3 million fee reported. That should be a great signing there. Cincinnati signed Nico Iocchini, so they're trying to shore up their striker pool. Galaxy signed Marco Reus, the German star, who immediately comes in for the Galaxy and has a goal and an assist. Columbus Crew get Abraham Romero from LAFC, get some backup goalkeeping help. We know about the Chicago Fire getting Ariel Lassiter and departing ways with Shaqiri. RSL acquire Polish winger Dominik Marchuk, so they're bringing in some more offense with the departure of one of their star players. He comes in from Polish top flight champions Jagiellonia Białystok. Apologies to all the listeners from Poland with my accent there. Montreal trade Rouen to Dallas. Sporting KC signed defender Joaquin Fernandez. NYCFC loaned Tyus Magno to Corinthians in Brazil. Charlotte FC acquired DP midfielder Pep Biel, coming in from Olympiacos in Greece. And that is all the news on the front page of the MLS transfer tracker. So make sure you go check that out. Get all the details on all the incoming, outgoing player moves throughout the league. But the bottom line is the league is doing a lot of business. They are moving players. They are identifying good talent. They are making better sales. They are holding on to players for what they are valuing them at. The only time I think I'm going to say the asterisk to that one is when the Chicago Fire said they valued Federico Navarro at $10 million. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that was just seeing what kind of counteroffer they could get and maybe try to drive away the vultures who are looking to pounce on a team that was really struggling and near the bottom of the table. But essentially we're seeing these MLS clubs really building up their value, knowing what they can get for them on the international market, and additionally knowing what they can get for them to stay within the league and make sure they can get the money that a lot of leagues around the world can't offer, at least can't offer on a stable paycheck. See the Reggie Cannon saga with Boa Vista. With all of that, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to thank you all for your comments, for your interactions. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your friends. Let's continue to grow Feed the Fire. Let's continue to grow the conversation around Major League Soccer. As always, thank you for listening, and let's go Fire.